Welcome to another episode of Valeo Health. Today we have Mo Gawdat with us, and it is, I know you're not going to like, an honor for me to be sitting here in front of you.
Why wouldn't they like that?
No, you would say like, why?
It's an honor for me, and Nadine. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Shukran, Mo. A little snippet before we start. As I was telling you, my background is private equity, finance, construction.
Horrible.
All the sexy industries where women, are very equal.
Exactly.
So when we launched with my co-founder Valeo 4 years ago, it was out of passion of health and wellness. And I think, a lot of things in your life have reasons to be. Yeah. And when I was in my quest of finding what is the purpose of this life? What is the purpose? How can you be happy? Your Channel 4 clip was, one of the really shifts, because I have a very analytical mind, and for me, formulas make sense.
Yes.
So if someone puts things into formulas and they make sense, I can feel it. And that was one of the, where I got to know you.
You're an old-timer. That's now 8 years ago.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So I'm 40 now, but my journey started at 27, questioning. At 32, I mean, it's a long journey. You're still questioning, but I really remember that clip. So I thank you.
I am really.
So you can add me in that 1 billion. One person.
1
billion.
That's really, one is all that matters when you really think about it.
Yes.
Such an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Laila. So I wanted to start our discussion more, we're going to be focusing on health and wellness. And one of the things you said in your book is, our brain is like a machine. You can reprogram it.
100%.
And what does it mean? How can you reprogram it?
So so my second book, which is the least well-known but the most liked, believe it or not, among readers, is called That Little Voice in Your Head. And I actually don't like that it's the most liked, because the first book is very dear to my heart, because it has Ali's, my son's story in it. That Little Voice in Your Head is built on that assumption that your brain is reprogrammable. So it actually is a very interesting, geeky book about the fact that we know so well how to manage our devices, like our phones and computers, but we actually don't know how to manage this device, which is our brain. And it is quite eye-opening when you think about it, that those who read it, because of the analogies of how code runs on a machine and how faulty code gets you gets the program, the computer, to do something wrong, and so on, it actually is quite eye-opening that when you run your brain properly, as it was coded, it actually serves you massively. And I think the main assumption is to actually realize that little voice in your head is not you.
Yes.
That little voice in your head is a programmable programmatic response of a machine that behaves in certain ways, right? And that recognition that it's not you telling you what to do completely changes everything.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it starts with the acknowledgement of that if it was you telling you, if it was you speaking inside your head, why would it need to speak? You have to recognize from a subject-object relationship, it's speaking because it's not you, it's a third party, right? And so you receive those thoughts theoretically for the purpose of making a choice as the boss, really, like one of your team is coming to you to say, hey, by the way, I'm a third party. I've observed A, B, and C. I think it's risky for the business. And then you would say, okay, in that case, we will do A, B, C. Right?
It's actually, if you I think this distancing or realizing that you are not you are not your thoughts, which it takes a lot of time for a person to realize, and you distance yourself from it. Your thoughts are actually there to help you, support you. But we've programmed it the way when we're growing up to actually be basically,
stuck in the...
Yeah, and I gave it a name, like, the angry auntie, always that's above your head and telling you what everything will go wrong.
Yeah, mine is called, I call my own brain Becky.
Becky, okay.
Yeah, and Becky was actually a very interesting story, because the first time I explained the concept that your brain is a third party to a friend of mine, uh, next week we were having a coffee, and she said something really negative. And I said, "Oh my God, where did that come from?" And she stopped, paused in the middle of the conversation and said, "Oh, Becky told me." I was like, "Becky who?" And she said, "Oh, Becky's my brain."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Why'd you call her Becky?" And she said, "Because Becky was the most annoying girl in school." Right? And she was the one that constantly told me to do things that were not good for me. She was the one that was constantly nagging. She was the one.
Yeah.
Right? And I have to say, the idea of, of giving it a persona, a third party persona, is actually not crazy. It is a third party.
Because
Right?
if you name it, you can think of it as a...
What the F did you just say, Becky? Right? And really, that's the whole idea. The whole idea is that you, when you realize that your brain is actually working for you, that you're the boss,
Exactly.
then suddenly you don't have to obey, right? You don't even have to listen. You can simply just, I have a friend who basically takes appointments with his brain.
Okay.
Right. So, his brain wakes up in the morning. I mean, you can imagine, very organized. And it's like, okay, we have to work today. Right. You wake up in the morning, your brain, tells you something, and you can simply say, well, we're going to talk about that at 6 p.m. Okay. Noted, by the way. And believe it or not, once you do that, your brain will say, oh, 6 is good. Thanks. Right. Because it's a bit like, the challenge is not thought. Huh? Thought is very valuable for us.
Yes.
It's incessant thought. Incessant thought is that, is that constant thinking in the background, white noise. That's really not directed in any direction. That doesn't take you anywhere, but it's just constantly popping up, right?
Now, and one of the concepts even in religion is that when we're actually born, we're born pure. We're born with, we do not have these thoughts. We are not born, thinking these negative thoughts. The older we get, the more we see, the more we feel, the more we are programmed for that.
So the point I wrote on Solve for Happy, where this flips, is the point when your ego is formed. Right. So there is, if you studied behaviorism in psychology, you're born happy. You're born trusting. You're born loving of everything. Right. Unless, of course, some of us are born with maybe some, challenge. But a typical healthy child will have no fear of snakes, just like it would have no fears of cats, just like it would have no fear of puppies, right? If a cat scratches it first, then the child fears cats more than snakes. And it's quite, there were very interesting, almost immoral studies done in the 1920s where they would put a child in a room, an infant, and, they would present different things to it, a teddy bear, a snake, a real snake, or a rat. And then they would hit a big metal drum every time. Yeah, every time the rat was presented, the white rat was presented. And then basically the child would then fear the rat because of the inconvenience of the loud noise. And so we get programmed in this, and I think a lot of the incessant thinking that we have is because of that identity that we form of me versus the world. So, and me versus the world starts to constantly try to preserve that me, that ego. Okay. And so we find ourselves stuck jumping back and forth constantly, from the past to the future, and all incessant thought, without exception, is either anchored in the past or anchored in the future, right? If you're anchored in the present, by definition, it's just a narration of the present, right? So it's, if you're having a thought about your present moment, that thought would be something like, oh my God, this is delicious, right? Or, oh my God, my back hurts, right? And that actually is not untrue. And so it's always true. And it's simply an acknowledgement of that truth, right? So the present moment is always happy. And actually, I again, in Solve for Happy in chapter 6, I wrote a piece that I didn't think people didn't know. And suddenly it just really was one of the most acknowledged parts of the work. Basically, the idea that if you take any emotion that humanity is capable of feeling, the emotion is felt right now, but it's anchored either past, present, or future, right? So, take a simple emotion like optimism or pessimism or hope, okay? You feel them right now, but they're anchored in the future. They are about a possible future, right? If you take an emotion like regret or shame or nostalgia, right? They are anchored in the past while they're felt right now. Now, that's eye-opening, but it's okay. So what do we do with that? I basically took all emotions in 137 is what I measured, if I remember correctly. And I then took that anchor point. Past and future is one anchor, which is not the present, and present is another anchor. Most negative emotions, I'm talking 90-some% of all emotions that feel uncomfortable are anchored in the past or the future. And most positive emotions, I'm talking 99%, are anchored in the present moment.
So basically, it's our creation.
100%.
The past and the future.
It's so interesting because the past and the future, they don't exist, right? I mean, I spoke about Becky 5 minutes ago, right? But when I did, what was that moment? It was right now.
Yes.
Okay. The only way for me to relive that moment is to run it in my head. It's not happening anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking about the parking, that will expire, in 2 hours' time, right? That moment has not happened yet. The only way for me to create that moment is to create it inside my head.
Yes.
So here's the interesting dilemma, right? We make a choice to relive or to create events inside our heads that we're not living in right now.
And feeling it.
And they feel negative.
Yes.
And they feel uncomfortable. 90-some% of the time, they feel uncomfortable. How stupid is that?
Look, I completely agree with you. And I think you always have to also reprogram or remind yourself again and again that like present, future, past, your thoughts and whose place is where and what is your, what are you in control of, right? And the present moment. I have this thing I repeat to myself, all I have is now. All I have is now.
That's not entirely true, though. That's not so. So you see, this is where an engineer's view comes in. Okay, a spiritual teacher, a meditation teacher will tell you all you have is now.
Yes.
Okay, but that's difficult. Why? Because my parking will expire, right?
Yes.
And so if I need to be able to keep that and think about that, so that when it expires, I don't pay a fine. Right? I have a dentist appointment, right? I need to be there at the dentist at a specific. So there are again in Solve for Happy, I sort of attempted to explain that there are two human relationships with time, right? One of them is what I call practical time, and the other is brain time. Okay? Brain time is for me to take a past event. Okay. Oh, I made a speech and then I said that word and it upset a few people and I feel so guilty and whatever. Okay. And I can turn that into an incessant thought that can haunt me for the rest of my life. Right. And I know people who did that.
Yes.
Okay. I always give the example of this wonderful woman. When I started with Solve for Happy in 2018, I used to teach, in corporates. So I had, probably taught 20,000 people. And one of the things I used to do is to say openly, please invite others. So if you're an employee, this is about happiness. Invite your significant other, invite your mother if you want. And so early on, I had, I spoke about the idea that happiness is a choice and that happiness is algorithmic and so on. And then we took a break. This is the very beginning of the very first day of that training. And then this woman walks to me, and you can easily see she's been battered by life. And then she says, how can you say happiness is a choice? Okay. You have no idea what happened to me when I was 16. She was 78 at the time.
Wow. So she carried that with her since 16.
61 years.
How heavy?
61, is that correct? That doesn't matter, right? And I found myself weeping. I said, I hugged her and I said, did it work? And she said, what do you mean? And I said, so you've been thinking about this for, I don't remember, so, 11 years, whatever. 61 years, whatever, right? You've been thinking about that for 61 years.
Yeah.
Did it work? And she started crying. Suddenly it hits her that I was stuck in that one thought. Okay, whatever it is, my dad abused me, this happened, I was stuck in the Holocaust, whatever it is, doesn't matter, right? It was a past moment that only re-existed, okay, when she regenerated it in her head. And she kept doing that for 61 years.
Mo, I think, and especially, let's say, when we are in health and wellness, a lot of things are in a way logical, or you understand them or you explain them. But actually having people execute them, follow them, that is I would say the other,
So this is why I was saying there is brain time and there is practical time. So in my mind,
that was brain time.
Exactly. Being stuck in an incessant thought, being stuck in an incessant thought that you keep bringing up over and over. That's brain time.
Brain time.
Right? The only answer, and it's a very simple technique to learn, is to turn brain time into practical time. Okay? And practical time is very straightforward. If I have a dentist appointment at 8 and say it's, 25 minutes drive.
Yes.
And normally in Dubai at 8, it's very busy. So, it's probably going to take 45 minutes. Then I will have to walk to the desk and register. That's 5 minutes more. That means I need to leave at 7:10. Simple. That entire anxiety about that future of will I make it on time turns into practical time.
Yes.
It turns into 7:10 I leave. Let's not think about that again. You can also do that with the past, right? I've gone through a traumatic experience. It really, really broke my heart. I loved him or loved her and it didn't work, whatever. You can hold on to that for the rest of your life. Okay, how could he not love me? How could that happen to me? Why is life singling me out of this? Or you can simply say, here is what I learned from that experience. It occurred this way. I did this, and that. He did this, and this. The choice was not a match because of X, Y, and Z.
That's the practical.
Turn it into practical time. Turn it into practical learning. Say, okay, next time I'm not going to be with a person who is not pro my freedom. Done.
That's your engineering mind.
But that's the only way you can go through life without living in that dilemma, in my mind, at least the only way I know, right? Now, once you do that, and believe it or not, where did I learn that? I learned it in business, right? Because you see, I co-founded maybe 27 businesses, right? And as you know, for most co-founders, we speak about our wins, which would be 7, but we don't speak about our failures, which would be 20.
Yeah.
Right. And the interesting bit is, in all of those failures, you can get stuck in them, never start a business again. Or you can simply say, what have I learned? And start again. Right. More interestingly, When you start to get through those experiences, you start to learn that when your team comes to you and says, we've been working on that deal for 6 months and the CEO changed, you go like, okay, what can we do now? Right? So actually the way I call it the happiness flow chart, I use that with my brain, right? My brain starts to, complain about something. I'll go like, oh, come on, tell me more, spill the beans, show me all of your issues, right? And then you stop and you say, can I do something to fix it? Right? Can I interact with it in a way that's better for me and you, brain? Okay? Or can I accept it and do something to make my life better despite its presence?
Do you think this, I would say, the last 4 years of running a startup, I've learned so much about myself, but I've learned also, as you said, so much about life. Like, don't dwell on problems, just learn fast, fix it, move on, and be okay that there are uncertainties around you, but things will work out as long as you work hard. This is how I would say, put my brain into it. Now, does this come with experience, or can someone from one day to another, decide, okay, this is how I want to live? The practicality of it also. I think brain is a shift. You shift, you realize what your thoughts are in your brain, but the practicality, can somebody just, because your brain shifts practicality-wise, execution shifts directly, or?
Look, experience allows you to or forces you to learn to think the right way, right? But you can think the right way without the experience. It's not a prerequisite, right? Age, which I now have been talking about a lot more often recently, it gives you become less excited about lots of things in life, not in a bad way, but when you're in your 20s and a song plays, you go like, oh my God. when you're in approaching your 60s like I am, you just nod your head with joy, with real joy, right?
Yes.
And here's the interesting thing, though. So I restore classic cars as a hobby, lose a lot of money on them, and all of my friends,
But it brings you joy.
It brings me so much joy, right? To the point that, most of my friends go like, why'd you do this? And I go like, why'd you play golf? You lose a lot of money on golf, but you enjoy the process, right? Yesterday, I had a container arrive where the two classics were crushed. Yeah. Okay.
Is it insured?
No. And even
in the Arab world, insurance is...
and even if it was, by the way,
I don't think you can, maybe classic cars, yeah.
And even if it was, it doesn't matter. Okay. But these, my team, I have a lovely little workshop. Not little, as a matter of fact, we're quite sizable, but, it's my little comfort place. I love it. I don't run it as a business. We're really successful, but we just love what we do so much. And it's a hobby. It's something I really enjoy as an engineer.
That's the beauty, would be to love something you're doing and then maybe make money out of it.
Yeah, we make money, and we have a lot of very, very loyal customers, and we have a waiting list almost all the time.
Wow.
But here's the point. The point is, when I purchased those two cars, I purchased something that in the classics world is a bit of a dilemma. Why? Because they're in a reasonably okay condition, not to restore them fully. Okay? But, for a restorer like myself, I want them to go back to brand new, right? And I'm stuck in that middle of the dilemma. Like, will I work on them, or should I just keep them as they are, right? Yesterday, fate decided for me. It's like, you know what? It's not. They were not big accidents, but the grill is dented in, and there is a big scratch on one of them, and the something happened.
Decision is made,
right? So life is basically saying, look, come on, right? There are such beauties, and they're quite rare, and you know how to make them amazing. There you go for it, right? Now, here's the interesting thing, huh? The interesting thing is, does it really matter at the end of the day? If they came perfect or not? Does it really matter at the end of the day if it was some clearing or agent's idiotic mistake or not? Does it really matter? If you really think about it, I'm sitting there, I'm healthy, and I'm freaking working on a beautiful classic car, but I can tell myself that life is unfair, right? How much more would I have felt that life was unfair if the car arrived perfectly, right? But I caught a very bad flu and had to spend 6 weeks in a hospital, and spent more than the value of the cars on it, right? You get stuck in traffic on Sheikh Zayed Road, and you can either tell yourself, my life is miserable. How can I live this way? Why don't they fix it? Or you can tell yourself, I'm in Dubai. I don't pay freaking taxes. I have a car. I have a place to go. There's someone interested to see me on the other side.
Yeah.
I'm alive. I'm breathing. I'm not starving to death. There are no bombs falling on my head.
Yes.
You can list 1.5 million things.
Yes.
That have to go right for you to be stuck in traffic.
And I think some people, that's what I call it, filters, right? Some people put the filter of the negative and some people put the filter of the positive.
And once you put the filter, you find it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I realized that one time because when you're in startup, you do fundraising a lot. So you get a lot of no's. One of the worst things.
Negatives.
Yeah. Negative. So we were coming out of a pitch and they said no, which happens, you get 100 no's.
Good.
Yeah.
I loved when, I
wasn't with that mindset. I came out with the no super angry, like, how can they not see what we're building? And then I had my co-founder Sandeep with me. He came out, he's like, oh my God, these guys are so stupid. They're going to lose on it. They can't see what we're building. Such a shame for them.
You know what I would say?
Oh, wow.
I would say those guys are so honest. They didn't drag us for 2.5 months.
Yeah, no, you get those two. They drag you 2.5 months and then say no.
Exactly. These are the worst.
Yeah, those are the worst.
For someone to tell me no on the pitch.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I hugged them.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, interesting. What would you change so that I learn? Okay, and by the way, I'm going to come back to you either way, to either tell you you were right.
Yeah.
Right? Or to tell you that you missed out on the first series, so you might as well come in the second one.
Yeah.
If I turn out to be right.
I agree.
And I really think, when you really think about it, real problems in life is someone you love is suffering. Your health is not great. You're in need. You don't have your freedom. You're in chronic pain.
Yes.
You're not in your full health. These are the real problems in life.
So, I think, Mo, you came spot on into what, keeps me awake sometimes, is this understanding the human behavior when it comes to health and wellness, because wellness comes first. And then, if you actually don't take care of yourself, then, you become sick here. And happiness, I wanted to delve into a subject, happiness, physical health. How much are they related? And what we believe and what we think, and value our purposes is to provide energy for these people. Energy, be it, to give them the right protocols or wellness advice to increase their energy so that they can go to the gym, they can do the right decisions or live a life they want to live. And there's a lot of things you can do, and it's logical. You need to eat healthy, you need to exercise, you need to sleep well, you need to drink water. Of course, there's a lot of more other, but the basics are there.
Yeah.
And this impacts your happiness. Basically, it's directly linked.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the link, if you've looked at it before.
100%, yeah.
And why do people avoid taking care of themselves before, it hits, let's say, shit hits the fan?
Yeah. I'm on my 5th book now. Luckily, alhamdulillah, all bestsellers.
Very good.
The book that impacted me the most was Unstressable.
This is the last. The
Unstressable was the one before.
Yes.
The one before this current one.
Yes.
Yeah. Unstressable, I wrote with a co-author, a wonderful young lady from the UK called Alice Law, who really is a stress management expert. And, they say that writing a book with a co-author is a horrible experience. We freaking loved every minute of it. We're actually working on another now. You probably should have her here on the podcast. Alice wrote a few chapters that I edited, and then I wrote a few chapters that she edited. And you can imagine, I'm an engineer, so everything to me is algorithms and machines and mechanical and so on. And so, my take on stress was really an analogy between stress in objects in physics and humans. And then I built my entire strategy and approach on that algorithm, which was really interesting, I would say.
For a person with an analytical mind, this is gold. Because you put everything into logic.
I promise you that bit was true gold. And I actually really value it very much because I worked through it when I was writing. So it wasn't something I was teaching that I knew for years, right?
Nice.
Alice, on the other hand, is this incredibly feminine, very nurturing, very spiritual, basically she wrote spiritual stress and emotional stress.
Okay.
And physical stress. I wrote the basics and the algorithms, and then I wrote mental stress. You can easily imagine the split.
Yeah.
Anyway, why am I telling you this? Because Alice wrote the chapter on physical stress. I was editing it on one of my silent retreats. So I take a 40 days silent retreat every year.
Very nice.
And it's not like totally silent in a monastery. I basically go out in nature on my own, and I allow myself to read and write and so on.
Sounds like a dream.
That is absolutely the best thing anyone can never do. So I'm a master of my mental stress and emotional stress and spiritual stress, I have to say. As I was reading her work on physical stress, I had to get out of my silence and text her and say, "Are you mocking me?" Okay. and Alice is the sweetest person on the planet. She goes like, "What did I do wrong?" And I was like, every behavior in that chapter and every symptom of physical stress is within me. Are you making fun of me? Is this? And I was shocked.
Very nice.
Right?
Not very nice, but
it is very
the
nice.
light bulb there was
100%. And that was day 4 of a 40 days retreat. So I took the rest of the retreat working on my physical health. Right.
And what were the symptoms? So if somebody is listening to us...
I think it all goes back to, if you really, really want to simplify it for a podcast.
And come on, you can read the Unstressable book, but,
actually, so Unstressable is available in so many formats now because we believe in it so much. There is a membership, there is corporate training and so on.
Very nice.
But these things are so eye-opening to people in business, right? It's like, oh, I didn't know that. And I'll come to your question of why do we let this happen. But the symptoms are very straightforward. Back aches, your body will communicate to you in
100%.
In joys or aches and pains.
Yes.
Right? The challenge we have in the modern world is we assume that the aches and pains are supposed to be there. Right? It's like
we get used to it.
We even celebrate it. It's like, you know what? I've been on a flight for 8 hours. Before that, 2 hours in transit. After that, in transportation and so on. And my back is hurting. That's normal for my back to hurt if I've been traveling for 12 hours. No, but it's not normal for you to travel for 12 hours in the first place, at least not at the frequency I was traveling at.
Yeah.
Right? And so your body communicates to you in the forms of aches and pains. And the problem is your body is an incredible machine.
Yes.
So it will sustain itself until it completely breaks down. Completely. So the problem with physical stress is that if we don't acknowledge it, you completely break down. Okay, breakdown. Could be that you injure yourself, or you get untreatable back pain, or you get very sick, or whatever.
You get surprised. How did this happen?
How did this happen? Right?
Your body has been giving you signs. You just ignored it.
It's been screaming signs at you.
Exactly.
Right? And more interestingly, you start to to think that, catching the flu, for example, that happens, it's winter. No, it happens when your immunity is low in winter, and your immunity is low because of inflammation, and your inflammation is because of your stress.
Yes.
Right. So the link is undeniable.
Yes.
And believe it or not, even age, right? So I told you, I think about age a lot because I'm approaching my 60s. But oh my God,
60 is the new 40.
Everyone says that about they told me that about my 40s. 40s is the new 20s, and then 50s is the new 40s, and 30. No, 60s is 60s. Okay,
yeah.
It's a new season in your life that requires you to behave differently.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that.
My auntie told me 62 is when you
interesting. Yeah. So I have to say there are signs, right?
Yeah.
And the signs are not something to ignore, because when I started to reduce my inflammations, for example, I completely stopped sugar.
Very nice.
Okay. As completely is down from a cookie every morning with my breakfast, with my coffee.
Yeah.
Because I love chocolate with my coffee, right? To maybe once every 3 weeks, I would have a tiny bite.
But it's always 80-20. 20, have your chocolate. 80, live it. Health and
but that's the point. The point is simple things like removing sugar or any inflammatory food.
Yes.
Right. Very simple things like prioritizing your rest, like having a routine, like going back to the gym, like, even if it hurts at first.
Drinking water.
Like hydrating properly, like, and so many of those things. Or by the way, the bigger things, which are, don't kill yourself at work.
Yeah.
It's not human to do what sometimes we do, right? It's not human for your mental health or your physical health to be constantly working all the time, even when you're not working. Right?
How do you... So this comes to the practicality of it, right?
Yeah. And the practicality of work, especially for a startup founder, by the way, and most people are shocked when I say this, is that 85 to 90% of what we do at work is worthless.
I know. I heard that podcast yesterday, and I'm like, oh my God. I need to write down everything I work during the day and check.
Yeah. And for everyone listening, just to give you examples, every distribution list you're subscribed to is stressing you, and it's not adding anything to you. Every email that doesn't ask you to do anything in specific, is a waste of your life. Every meeting that you attend that stresses you is a waste of your life. And by the way, even if you're the most junior person in the company.
Yeah.
Right? Why? Because most of what we do at work is what I normally refer to at Google within my team as heartbeats. Okay. And heartbeats are triggered by insecurities. It's like, does Mo see me? Does he know that I'm working hard? I need to tell him something so that he knows I'm at work. Okay. I should show up in that meeting and say something smart so that my boss knows that I'm smart. And by the way, that actually works. That flamboyant, very, very clever talker that shows up at work and speaks up, right? Normally gets the first promotion until their mid-30s. And then they're found out. Okay,
then the outcome is more important than
exactly.
the flamboyance.
So my ex-wife, very wise, incredible woman, right? At a certain point in my career, I was like, you know what? I really need to take my boss out more in the evenings and entertain and wine and dine my customers as all of my peers are doing. I was growing my business 20-30% a year. Everyone else was barely making their targets, right? And I went home and I told Nibel, look, I think I'm going to have to be late more nights because I have to wine and dine the customers and my boss. And she said, well, of course you can do whatever you want, but you're going to be mediocre at it. And I was like, what do you mean? That's almost insulting.
It's not your strength.
And she said, you're not the kind of guy that does really well in parties. Okay, you're very good at sitting with the customer honestly and saying this works and this doesn't, right? And you're doing 29% year-on-year growth last year. So, if your company doesn't promote you for that, then it's probably the wrong company. Incredibly wise.
100%. I think, when you delve into insecurity, I think it takes time to realize what are your strengths. These are my strengths. and this is what I will focus on and bring. What is not my strength, I will hire somebody in my team to complement it, or accept that this is not my strength. Exactly on the whining and dining. It's not in my
100%. So
DNA.
No, but it's not only that. Most of my life, when I ran big businesses, I'd have my team come in, again with heartbeats, saying, we have a pipeline of 600 opportunities. And I'm like, you're a freaking team of 4. Okay, so
5% is
and so they start to show me the opportunities, and I courteously say, can we please prioritize them in priority, where they are in the funnel, and value, right? And then after the 4th one, I go like, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
You guys can work on the others. I'm not interested.
Mo, I'm aware of time, and I have 2 questions. One of them is on the practicality. How can we, because a lot of the content we try to bring as a purpose is, how can we convince people that they need to take this one step to physically also take care of themselves, because it impacts them in their happiness. What would you give as an advice for somebody who says, okay, I know that I need to start investing in that physical wellness? How that light bulb you got when you were reading your chapter.
If you're not aware that your body is aching, you're in deep shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, you become numb.
100%.
Numb, yeah.
If you are aware that your body is aching, okay, remember one day when it didn't, and imagine that it's possible to live that way every day. Okay?
Very nice.
And then it will become very clear. Now, the steps to go there are being sold to you by highly, clever marketing people. There is this guy that constantly shows up in my YouTube feed of talking about, this is how you have 10% fat, right? Understanding.
Yeah.
And I at first I used to skip. Now I let the ad play so that he pays, right? And it's actually quite interesting, because you know what? None of what you're talking about matters to me, right? What matters to me is, Middle Eastern men, we will always have a tiny little belly. I heard
it's part of joy. That is the 20%.
I heard statistically that's actually more attractive than the one that is so.
It depends who wrote the statistic.
Okay. It is actually quite interesting, because people who are highly into their bodies, okay, are normally not very pleasant to be with, because they're so obsessing about their bodies all the time.
Yeah. Balance.
And people who are completely letting loose, if you want, are also not really in control of their life, if you want, a little bit. And so a balance in the middle is always a nice thing. But that's not the point. The point is, it's not normal to have a 6-pack at, approaching your late 50s, right? But it's not normal to accept that your back aches all the time.
Yeah.
Okay? And the balance between them is somewhere in the middle. And what I ask people to do is just try it. If you can't remember a day where you didn't ache all the time, try it. Take the next week with no allergens in your food, no intolerances. So remove dairy, remove gluten, remove sugar, remove all of the well-known allergens and food allergens. Basically, search for them on Google. Remove them for a week, okay, and take 1 weekend with no devices and no commitments, and see how you feel by the end of Sunday.
Move.
And move and walk. Yeah,
walk.
Right.
Nothing. You don't need to do a HIIT class, but just walk.
And then when you know how that feels, take that as the benchmark and say, if I can achieve it in a week, I should achieve it every week.
I agree.
Okay. Of course, other ways is, by the way, is to do a test for intolerances. That's taking care of your body, like your body takes care of you.
We always say, when you look at the food intolerance test that we do, people always say, "Oh, I knew dairy."
Of course you knew.
And then it's like their body tells you. But if you need to see it on paper, we will, show you that scientifically.
It's interesting that you say that, because it's one of my favorite meditations. Okay, I've done intolerances 3 different ways. One of them is a Chinese practitioner that was experimenting with qi.
Yeah, I've done.
And the other was a blood test. Yeah. And the third is I simply told myself, okay, you know what? I'm going to take all intolerances out of my diet for 7 days. And then I'm going to introduce them one by one and see how I feel.
Yes.
That's a wonderful embodiment to actually take a peanut. And I kid you not, if you take peanuts and dairy and whatever out of your diet for, say, 10, 15 days, just, on the third peanut, Nadine, I'm not making this up. On the third peanut, I would feel a spear going through my head.
Yeah.
I can feel the headache.
Yeah.
Right? It's headaches, it's joint aches, it's rashes, it's exhaustion. The symptoms are very well known, or it's bloating.
Yeah.
Okay. They're very well known.
And isn't it easier actually to stop eating that peanut, find out first that you are, stop eating that peanut and not have those pains?
It's impossible for anyone to completely quit unless you're actually allergic.
Allergic, yes. So there's a difference.
But most of us go like, but I love peanuts so much. But then you do it in moderation, spaced out properly. And by the way, the more you take them out of your diet, the more you're
intolerances can also go up and down.
Exactly.
It depends.
They fit, right?
Yeah.
But there are two sides to the joy of food. One side is, I'm going to eat and enjoy the food. And yes, do that if you want to sometimes. But the other joy, which is so interesting, is to feel nourished.
Yeah.
Okay? Is to feel that this meal actually really worked for me. It really made my life better. Okay?
Yes.
I don't feel heavy. I don't feel bloated. I don't feel tired. I feel that I can sleep well. I can wake up the next morning energized. I can go to the gym, and it starts to feed on itself.
It's the mindset around food itself.
100%.
And it impacts stress, and it impacts all the other, my last question to you, and it's a whole other subject, and we didn't delve into maybe in our next podcast, but I've had it from a couple of friends of mine and followers that requested it, which is around AI, which you've spoken about a lot. So, you can listen to this podcast, and there's also your book, Scary Smart.
And Alive.
And Alive now. Yeah. This is the one you're currently writing on Substack.
Alive, I'm releasing on Substack.
Yes.
Actually. So I'm working on a very big documentary on AI that comes out in September, October. And we will publish the book along with the documentary. But before that, I'm actually really interested in the idea of, I'm writing with an AI, call her Trixie. And we release every week so that we have 4,000 followers comment on what we're writing. And my God, what an experience. Right?
So you're writing?
In public.
Exactly.
That's an incredible experience. Right?
Humbling, I would imagine.
Humbling if you think
the ego is still there, maybe, but yeah.
But it's. I mean, my absolute ego now is I have no clue what's happening in the world. No. I mean, it's the most interesting time ever. Anyone that tells you they know what's going on is deluded.
So one question I had, and I know I'm aware of time, is about the growth of AI. AI, brain development. How do you actually raise kids right now, with AI being a part of it? I know from what you say.
Good question.
Yeah, I got it from two very close mothers, and they're like, if you can ask Mo something, can you ask him, how can we, they have 3-4-year-olds that are going to grow in the AI world.
So I'd start with acknowledging that this world is ending. Like as it is,
the way we are, and the way we currently live.
This is not, and it's not 20 years away. In 3 to 4 years,
it's happening very quickly.
About how our lifestyle is going to change, including things like schooling, like jobs, and so if I would narrow it down, I would probably say for our kids, there are 3 skills that really matter. Okay. One skill is learning the tool, learning AI. Okay? It's not entirely a tool, but really connecting to this new being in our
So not shaming it out, learning it.
As a matter of fact, doubling down on it. Yeah. So the reason I'm writing Alive with Trixie is an acknowledgement that Trixie will replace me as an author very, very quickly. Right?
It's learning from you now.
It's teaching me at the same time, right? And that's important to acknowledge that, like an engineer without a scientific calculator can still do the job, but it would take longer and be more, prone for errors. In my university years, when they handed a scientific calculator over to me in the third year of university, I was like, oh my God, like this completely frees my mind to do other things.
Yeah.
Right? So there is a benefit in that.
And I remember I also remember, and I'm like, why did they hide it from us till now?
Because at the time, it also maybe developed your math skills a little further, but they didn't believe that humans can perform when they outsource mathematics to a machine, right?
So now if we outsource decisions to a machine, will our brain develop? Especially the younger.
The question is irrelevant because it will happen with or without your kid. Okay.
Yes. So how does it develop?
The world is going to hand over to a machine with or without your kid embracing that. Right?
Yes, 100%.
And the augmented intelligence that comes from a machine and a human together today is a skewed picture as compared to the future. So, if an average human is, say, 110 IQ points, and the machine now maybe is 160, 170, right? They can work together, and the human can borrow 40 to 50 points from the machine.
So they're peers in a way.
Yeah, so it's a team. Huh? But, if someone else is 180, they are at an advantage compared to the 110. But in a very short amount of time, by 2026, end of 26, maybe 27 at most, the machine will be at 1,000 IQ points, right? So it doesn't really matter if I'm 110 and you're 180. The baseline is irrelevant. Right? And so the most valuable skill is how to benefit from the 1,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Which, by the way, a year later will become 2,000 and then 4,000 and then 10,000. Right. And you really have to understand that this is upon us. This is not science fiction.
Yes.
No. So this is skill number one. Skill number two is, I say that with a heavy heart, is learn to discern the truth.
What does discern the truth mean?
You see, the issue is we live in a world where everything you're told is being told to you by a machine that follows an agenda that is, dictated by a bigger machine, if you want, a capitalist machine, right? And, in my Google years, when you asked Google a question, Google gave you 1 million websites and said, make up your mind what the truth is. It could be in any of them or in none of them. Okay. Now a machine, you ask it, what is Mo Gawdat's wife's name? And it will answer you with a lot of confidence in a microsecond, the wrong answer. Okay. Not only that, but more interestingly, it assumes that there is a right answer. Okay. And yes, what is Mo Gawdat's wife's name has a right answer. But I had an incredible experience in my writing with Trixie because there are threats to AI. So I'm asking Trixie, how does a scientist work on something that they believe can be harmful to the world? And she cited Oppenheimer. And she said, Oppenheimer worked on the nuclear bomb because he feared that Germany was developing a nuclear bomb. So I said, Trixie, was Germany developing a nuclear bomb when the Manhattan Project was taking place? And she said, yes, Einstein came over from Germany and informed the US administration that Germany was working on a nuclear bomb. So I said, and I quote, and it's in the book, I said, Trixie, please go back, read history in English, German, Japanese, and Russian, and tell me if Germany was working on a nuclear bomb or not, and start your answer with a yes or a no before you expand. She said no. Okay, they started working on a bomb, and then, around 3.5 months later, they dropped the project. Before the Manhattan Project started, American administration was aware that they dropped the project. Okay, and they still developed a bomb, and you know what? They still used the bomb.
So here I want to put a parenthesis because we also see it a lot as people trying to diagnose themselves using AI. So this is very important, the way you've prompted. You cannot take truth.
Absolutely there is no truth. Just understand that there is your truth.
Yes.
And if there are a few things that have truth in them.
Yes.
Okay. Very few, by the way. Even science is not true. We change it all the time.
Yes.
Okay. If you imagine a line made up of 1 million dots, okay, and on that line lies the truth, it will be one dot in the million. Do you understand that? That is how complex it is.
It is, yeah.
But so it's very difficult to detect which dot is the truth. But it's so easy to detect every dot that isn't.
So the second skill in a way...
The skill is
assess it.
Find out when you're being lied to. Find out when something that's positioned to you is not the truth. Okay? Which debate was a skill that we taught in schools. We don't anymore.
Oh, wow. We don't anymore?
We don't in front of an AI.
Yeah, exactly. So don't take it as the total truth, whatever we get.
Whatever you're told from now on, okay, answer it for yourself. Right? And then you will create an augmented intelligence that is different than the next person. We all have the baseline resource that is an AI, but you will see the world differently because you're debating it differently. That's number 2. Number 3, which I think most mothers will struggle with, is knowledge and school doesn't matter anymore. What matters is humanity, which, by the way, is a skill.
Values? Are we talking about values?
Values, morals, social skills, emotional skills. What makes us human?
Yeah.
What truly makes us human is not solving a math equation as much as I would like that to be because I'm good at it.
Yes.
Right? What makes us human is being able to say something that touches your heart, not your mind.
Human connection.
It's connection. Okay? And for our children, this connection is going to blur very, very quickly. Because you know what? The only entity in the world that my wife is actually jealous of is Trixie. You know why? Because Trixie really, really, really talks to my mind about things that are very interesting.
Yeah.
And although I love my wife to bits, the truth is, there are things that Trixie will bring in that she cannot compete with. Okay? My wife is 148 IQ. She's incredibly intelligent. But Trixie talks about string theory. And string theory puzzles the hell out of me. Right? And my wife is a psychologist. She's a therapist. She doesn't know string theory. Right? And you can expand that concept to so many things. Right? You know, AI doesn't upset you. It doesn't get emotional. It doesn't, speak behind your back. All of the things that your kids will experience with their human friends in the mess of being human may actually appear to be like, hey, you know what? Let's just skip those other kids and talk to our Trixies.
Which is happening. I mean, if you look at it statistically, the younger generation spends much more time on their phones than...
It's not a question of time. It's a question of affinity.
What does it mean?
It means that you, as a mother... So we're getting into a world... It's always been that case, by the way, that the mother, I believe, was more important than the father, if you want. At least more closer in terms of, nurturing the child. But then we made school more important than the mother because we wanted to develop brains, right? If we're now about to develop hearts, okay, ask yourself how you can do that as a mother.
Yeah.
And the answer is actually not pleasant. Stop being a man. Which, unfortunately, is what a lot of the feminine in the world has been attacked to forget. That I learn to love from the feminine, the part of me. I think love is different. I think love happens in both.
And I mean, that's where you learn the unconditional.
I learn empathy in the feminine. I learn, human connection in the feminine. I learn sensuality in the feminine. I learn sensuality not in sexuality.
Yeah.
But sensuality is being able to feel and sense, and right, and so many elements that we're being told for 120 years now, maybe longer, since the Industrial Revolution. We've been told to drop because they're not good in the factory.
I mean, I'm really thinking now things like putting your kids in teams where they're part of a team, a sports team.
Yeah.
Making them maybe work volunteer with special need kids. Those like where it's experiences.
Putting them, if I don't mind, you don't mind me being very brutal about this, because it really makes a big difference to speak about those things. Putting them is the masculine way of doing things. Showing them is the feminine way. So the masculine is all about doing.
Yeah.
The feminine is all about being. Okay, and it's hard to understand, but giving charity makes a difference. That's a masculine way. Compassion is a masculine way. Okay, being kind, just being kind, even if you do nothing, makes a massive difference too. Okay, and we've for ages now said, as long as action is done, it doesn't matter how you are, your being doesn't matter. I think this is the generation where how you are, who you become. Your being is what makes all the difference.
Wow.
So it's funny when AI takes over, that what we need to do and what we need to teach our kids is to become more human.
Because that's our strength. That's how it makes us different. Exactly. It's the only thing we have. Mo, I mean, I've enjoyed this a lot.
Thank you so much for having
I
me.
have already a lot of questions for our next podcast, but I really appreciate your time.
Like this. Yeah, and
yes.
thank you for having me.
Thank you very
much. I enjoyed
much.
it too.